Have you ever pictured Switzerland? You probably think of stunning alpine landscapes, delicious chocolate, and a long history of neutrality. But what if I told you that for centuries, this seemingly peaceful nation had a dark secret hidden in its cities? For hundreds of years, Jewish people were systematically banned from living in almost all Swiss cities. This isn't just a footnote in history. It's a long and complex story of prejudice, economic fear, and religious persecution that shaped the country in ways we're only now beginning to fully understand. So, how did this happen? Why were Jewish communities, who had lived in these areas since Roman times, suddenly cast out? Let's dive into the little-known history of why Switzerland closed its city gates to its Jewish population. Our story begins in the Middle Ages. Jewish communities were present in cities like Basel, Zurich, and Geneva as early as the 13th century. They were often merchants, traders, and moneylenders' professions that were crucial for the developing urban economies. At the time, Christian doctrine forbade usury, or lending money at interest. This created a unique economic niche for Jewish communities who were not bound by these same religious laws. They became the bankers of their time, providing capital that fueled trade and urban development. So, for a while, there was a kind of tolerance, not based on friendship, but on mutual economic need. Jewish residents were protected by local lords or city councils in exchange for heavy taxes. They were a vital, if separate, part of the city's fabric. But this fragile coexistence was about to be shattered. The turning point came in the mid-14th century with the arrival of the Black Death. This devastating plague wiped out nearly half of Europe's population, and people were desperate for someone to blame. In a wave of hysteria and misinformation, Jewish communities became the primary scapegoats. Horrific and baseless rumors spread like wildfire, accusing them of poisoning wells to cause the plague. This led to a series of brutal pogroms across Europe, and Switzerland was no exception. In 1349, in cities like Basel, Zurich, and Strasbourg, which was then part of the Holy Roman Empire, entire Jewish populations were rounded up. Hundreds were burned alive, while others were expelled. The massacres were driven by a toxic mix of religious fanaticism, deep-seated prejudice, and pure greed. Once the Jewish residents were gone, their property was seized, and any debts owed to them were conveniently cancelled. Following these horrific events, most Swiss cities officially banned Jews from settling within their walls. This wasn't a temporary measure. It became official policy for centuries. If a Jewish person needed to enter a city for business, they had to pay a special toll, a humiliating tax just for the privilege of entry. They were often required to wear distinctive clothing, like a pointed hat, to mark them as outsiders. They couldn't stay overnight and had to leave before the city gates closed at dusk. Life was a constant state of insecurity. Imagine having to conduct your business under the constant threat of expulsion, marked as different, and treated as a perpetual foreigner in the land your ancestors had lived in for generations. So, if they were banned from the cities, where did they go? Two villages in the Argo region, ending in Enlegno, became particularly important. Here, Jewish communities were allowed to settle, but their lives were still heavily restricted. They were forbidden from owning land or engaging in most trades, forcing them back into money lending and cattle trading. These two villages became the cradle of Swiss Jewry for the next 300 years. They developed a unique culture and their own dialect, a mix of German and Hebrew. They built synagogues and maintained their traditions, creating a vibrant community against all odds. But they were isolated, living as second-class subjects with very few rights. The Protestant Reformation in the 16th century, led by figures like Zwingli in Zurich and Calvin in Geneva, did little to improve the situation. While the Reformation challenged the authority of the Catholic Church, it didn't challenge the underlying anti-Jewish sentiment. In fact, some of the reformers' writings were intensely hostile. The old religious arguments against Judaism were simply repackaged with a new theological spin. The economic motivations also remained. The powerful city guilds, which controlled trade and crafts, saw Jewish merchants as unwelcome competition. By keeping them out, they maintained their monopoly. So, the bans stayed firmly in place, reinforced by both religious doctrine and economic protectionism. The walls around the cities were not just physical. They were walls of prejudice. It wasn't until the Enlightenment and the shockwaves of the French Revolution in the late 18th century that things began to slowly change. The revolutionary ideals of liberty, equality, and fraternity started to challenge the old order across Europe. In 1798, France invaded Switzerland and established the Helvetic Republic, a centralized state modeled on the French system. For the first time, the new constitution granted, in theory, equal rights to all male citizens, regardless of their religion. This was a monumental step forward. The special taxes and restrictions on Jewish people were abolished. For a brief moment, it seemed like a new era of freedom had dawned. However, this progress was short-lived. When Napoleon's empire collapsed in 1815, Switzerland restored its old confederacy system, and many of the old restrictions on Jewish citizens were brought back. The fight for emancipation had to be fought all over again, canton by canton. It was a long, arduous process that took another 50 years. Liberal politicians and Jewish community leaders campaigned tirelessly for equal rights. They faced intense opposition, with many arguing that Jews were a separate nation who could never be truly Swiss. The debate was fierce, but the tide was slowly turning, partly due to pressure from other countries like France, the Netherlands, and the United States, who had granted their Jewish citizens full rights and were critical of Switzerland's discriminatory laws. Finally, in 1866, after a nationwide referendum, Switzerland granted full and equal civil rights to its Jewish population. The centuries-old bans on settlement and the restrictions on professions were officially lifted. For the first time in nearly 500 years, Jewish people were free to live, work, and vote wherever they chose in Switzerland. This was followed by a revision of the federal constitution in 1874, which explicitly guaranteed the freedom of religion and belief for all. The ghettos of Endingen and Lengnau began to empty, as families moved to the city's Basel-Genève to build new lives and contribute to the country's booming industrial economy. Today, Switzerland's Jewish community is a small but integral part of the nation's diverse society. But the story of their long exclusion is a powerful reminder that even the most peaceful and prosperous nations have complex and often dark chapters in their history. It shows us how religious intolerance, economic fear, and scapegoating can lead to centuries of injustice. Understanding this history is not about assigning blame. It is about acknowledging the past and all its complexity so we can build a more inclusive and tolerant future. The journey from exclusion to emancipation was a long and difficult one, and it's a story that deserves to be remembered. Thank you for watching, and if you found this history interesting, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more stories from the overlooked corners of history.